Good morning, it's day 2 of Adobe Summit. I just got some coffee and slammed down an egg and bacon souffle. 2 less sessions today, but longer sessions. Well, we're back. End of day 2. I actually have more sessions this afternoon, but because of the scheduling for the rest of the day, I wanted to sit and do my little talkie portion and editing now. Same drill as yesterday, just going to kind of run through the notes and give my sort of thoughts. It was not as information dense as yesterday in terms of takeaways. There was a lot of sort of recycled information, but we'll get to all of that. My first session was called Optimize Site Performance with Adobe Experience Manager Gen AI Capabilities, which was a lab. And when I first sat down, the instructor asked, who here works directly with the back end of your company's website? And everyone's hand went up but mine. So it was not a session I probably should have signed up for. But most everything that I want to talk about was in the keynote. So the day 2 keynote, notably the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, was again interviewed like the Coca-Cola CEO yesterday. Some interesting stats regarding JP Morgan Chase is they have $4 trillion in assets and they move $10 trillion around the world a day. He was kind of a funny guy to read, Mr. JP Morgan Chase. He was just felt like kind of an old guy, but in not in a bad way. He was he says you can't have it all if you're not organized. That was something he kept harping on over and over, was organization. And he said that there are some people who just can't get up in the day and they can't organize themselves out of a paper bag, and you should not have those people running anything. And the whole audience, there was like I don't think it went over well, but I couldn't quite read the room there. U.S. economy has been good since the pandemic with, and I put in quotations, significant but. So he said, but there's a significant but. Part of our exceptionalism as America is our spending. And at first I was like, hell yeah. But he was talking about COVID aid spending, I believe. It was a little bit convoluted. So he was just talking about how much of a debt we've racked up since COVID and how COVID created such an immense amount of debt. But then he tried to spin it into sort of being like the working class is doing better than they think they are. And maybe that they're spending, I couldn't quite, it was either going to be really out of touch and insulting or really based. And I don't know where it fell, and maybe he doesn't either. This turbulence, referring to the turbulence in the economy, this turbulence could force us in a different direction, and he doesn't know that he feels good about that direction. I thought that was an interesting thing for the CEO of JP Morgan Chase to say. He said, quote, hopefully inflation comes down. Everything I see is inflationary. He was mentioning how in order for the world to grow, in order for the line to go up, it's all going to be inflationary. So as a society, we should expect to see inflation everywhere. Again, I didn't really know what the takeaway was. That he mentioned the green economy is going to cost money. But his sort of outlook, I guess, that he was portraying is that going forward, no matter what, everything's going to inflate, and that is just a natural part. I guess he was just sort of saying buckle up and don't complain about it because this is the way things go. And I mean, honestly, I kind of don't disagree with that. I just think the tone coming from the CEO of the world's largest bank is weird. Long-term trend over time will be more spending and a higher demand for spending. Again, referencing that inflationary kind of concept. Technology has driven all change for mankind. This is when he switched over to AI. AI will drive everything. AI is like the internet. And then he noted, which was a fair comment, that the internet came out in 1968, saying that technology takes a long time to change the world. You know, he said that it took a long time for industrial revolution to sort of roll out. It took a long time for the printing press to roll out. I think that's actually, especially with what I was talking about yesterday, that is a good thing to note, that AI, you know, he believes AI will change the world, but just because we have it now doesn't mean it's changing the world now, and doesn't mean it's going to change the world fast. And that was actually a really refreshing thing for me to hear from somebody who's very pro AI, because I feel like a lot of the sort of pro AI sentiment is that get ready, it's going to all change, it's going to be exponential. But we don't feel that all the time. But I think that if you put it in that context of like, yeah, it will change the world. It's just going to take a little while. Again, I found that to be kind of a refreshing statement from someone like that. A business should look at itself from the point of view of a customer. He said, as a company, we might think it's great, but they can't stand it, which I wrote that down because, again, that sort of, horse and carts, again, the things that I said yesterday, which is just because Adobe loves their generative software, maybe the consumer can't stand it from a, advertising perspective. I don't think that's what he meant, but that was just a thought that I had. He then goes on to talk about how JP Morgan Chase has taken on AI and how they implemented AI into their workflow from the very beginning. He says, we were always big math and AI only took us to the next state, which is probably a really valid point because obviously banking is just a bunch of math. And so for AI, like their most important thing that they can do with it is just more complex math, faster, better, bigger amounts of math. And so that would make a lot of sense. He says JP Morgan is working on developing their own AI, which I thought was interesting. And that is sort of a separate thing. They're just trying to work on that big math aspect of it. Because again, processing data, very useful to a bank. The hardest part is getting the data organized to where it's accessible. Again, that was also interesting because they have so much data, but to organize it in a way that the AI can actually utilize it and process it correctly to then communicate it in a more simple term for a human to make a business decision on it. It's not the job of tech, it's the job of management. Another great point is that sort of if AI is going to be adopted, it has to move out of this like tech sector and become something that managers, you can't have your IT department in charge of AI for it to become ubiquitous among business. It needs to be adopted by the management, and the managers and the leaders have to be in charge of it. I thought that was a really great point. By law, banks can't share data. I wrote that down because what followed it was this weird little tangent he went off on about how healthcare shouldn't share data. And that was like kind of unrelated, but he said, oh, and by the way, I also don't think that healthcare should be sharing data. That's your data that you should keep. I don't disagree, but it was just funny because I don't think he was really on script. There's also a point in the beginning of his thing where he started to a little bit take a turn about, mentioning tariffs, and I could just feel everyone tighten because it was starting to get a little bit political, and then the interviewer was like, okay, let's switch directions. But yeah, I mean, overall, he was really good at the American dream speech, which makes sense. I mean, he just kept going on about how JP Morgan Chase is here to help the American build a dream and get a house, and, you need financial and investment and all these opportunities that, to be honest, from what I understand about the largest banks, I mean, the bank sector is probably the biggest culprit in the pain that a lot of the American people are feeling. That's just my personal take, all right? So that's, So then the keynote moved on to talk about unified customer experience and AI. They sort of unveiled or just talked a little bit about AI Assistant, which is a software that adds agents, which is pretty much just intelligent and autonomous software that can go into that's going into all their softwares, and that's basically an AI aggregator that goes out and finds data that you're using. So it just implements this idea that across all customer kind of analytic bases, they can go, hey, go find me a customer that's into X, Y, and Z that falls into these categories, and it can go out and do that, and you can put it in simple terms rather than having to search through the data manually. Then there was a presenter for a tech demo that I just loved. It just hit.
I was able to publish a draft of my journey all the way to the canvas. Easier than room service. Okay.
It was a beautiful thing. I don't know. It was like my favorite part of the keynote. It just fantastic. Adobe Brand Concierge. That was just a software. The example they sort of demonstrated is that it will now change your advertisements and might offer you a shirt in certain colors that matches a pair of pants that you might have bought 2 weeks ago from a different person. So it's just more of that data tracking that we're all sort of, I think, subconsciously aware of, but it was more of a demo of some of the software that's directly responsible for that. The Hillary Cook, who's the head of marketing, I believe, for Marriott, came on and she spoke, and it was really interesting to watch how much Marriott has been able to expand their marketing campaigns through the use of Adobe products. Just the only thing I really wrote down was that Marriott manages 30 plus brands with over 10,000 destinations. And that was it. So not as much as yesterday. Everything still kind of holds. Again, I have some more sessions this afternoon, but I'll just kind of ball those up into tomorrow. So less talking for you. I'm so sorry, but thank you.